The bustling terminal was filled with the usual chaos of travelers, hurried footsteps, last-minute gate calls, and the soft hum of flight attendants preparing for boarding. But in the midst of it all, something happened that no one saw coming. A black woman, her head held high, approached the gate with her suitcase, unaware of the storm about to break. As she passed by, one flight attendant, clearly in a rush, kicked her suitcase aside, barely sparing a glance. What was meant to be a quick gesture, a simple act of impatience, would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Moments later, she would stand before her manager, her future hanging by a thread, wondering, how did a single moment lead to everything falling apart? The woman, whose name was Mariah, had always carried herself with dignity. A seasoned traveler, she was used to the impersonal, sometimes frustrating interactions that came with air travel. Yet today, something felt different. She had boarded flights for years without incident, navigating the labyrinth of terminals with practiced ease. Her brown eyes scanned the bustling crowd as she approached the gate, her thoughts a quiet hum of the day's schedule. It had been a long flight from Atlanta, and all she wanted was a smooth transfer to her connecting flight. Mariah wasn't one to make a scene. She was calm, composed, and always tried to avoid confrontation. But as she passed the gate, a flight attendant, rushing past with a cart, kicked her suitcase aside. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a deliberate shove, a dismissive motion that felt too pointed to be an accident. Mariah, taken aback, stopped for a moment, feeling the sting of the act. The attendant didn't even stop to apologize, brushing past her without a second glance. For a moment, Mariah just stood there, frozen. She was used to the subtle acts of prejudice, the moments that went unnoticed by most, but left their mark on her. But this felt different. This felt personal. She glanced at the attendant, who was now disappearing into the crowd. Mariah's mind raced with thoughts. Could this have been a mistake? Or was it just another act of racism masked as casual negligence? As she gathered herself, the other passengers continued with their business, oblivious to what had just transpired. But for Mariah, the incident left a lingering taste of injustice. She felt a growing unease, an undercurrent of tension she couldn't ignore. She pushed it aside for now. After all, she had a flight to catch. But as she walked toward the gate, her hands gripped her suitcase a little tighter, her heart beating a little faster. Little did she know, the flight attendant's actions were only the beginning. What seemed like a minor inconvenience would soon snowball into a full-blown crisis. The ripple effect would leave Mariah questioning everything, her career, her integrity, and the true price of standing up for herself in a world that seemed determined to keep her down. Mariah's mind drifted as she took her seat in the waiting area, trying to calm her nerves. She had already filed a complaint once before, but this felt different. There was an unsettling sensation that something was about to unfold, something far bigger than a misplaced suitcase. She glanced around at the other passengers, wondering if anyone else had noticed. The terminal buzzed with the familiar sound of announcements and the shuffle of people trying to get to their gates, but the incident with the flight attendant weighed heavily on her. She tried to shake it off, focusing on the upcoming flight, but her mind kept returning to the moment. The way the attendant had looked past her, as if she was invisible. It wasn't the first time Mariah had felt invisible, but this time it felt sharper, more deliberate. The flash of indignation she'd felt earlier began to simmer, bubbling to the surface again. Mariah's fingers tapped nervously against her suitcase. The soft click of her nails, a small rhythmic beat that kept time with her growing discomfort. Her thoughts were interrupted by the shrill call of the boarding announcement. The gate agent's voice echoed over the loudspeaker. Flight 1857 to Dallas is now boarding. Priority passengers first. Mariah gathered her things, standing up and walking toward the gate. She knew she should keep her head down, board the plane and forget about the incident. But a part of her, a louder voice, told her she couldn't let it go. Not this time. not when it felt like it meant something more. As she approached the gate, she saw the same flight attendant who had kicked her suitcase earlier. Her heart sank. The attendant was busy chatting with another staff member, clearly unaware that Mariah was approaching. For a second, she considered just passing by, pretending nothing had happened, but as the attendant made eye contact with her, Mariah felt the anger rise once again. It was then that she realized it wasn't just the suitcase. It was the fact that she had been treated as less than, that she had been dismissed in a way that was so familiar, yet so jarring at the same time. "Excuse me?" Mariah said, her voice shaking slightly as she stepped forward. The flight attendant turned, her expression unreadable. "Yes?" she asked, not missing a beat, though there was a faint hint of annoyance in her tone. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm not—" "Sure if you realized, but you kicked my suitcase earlier," Mariah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It was unnecessary and honestly it made me feel uncomfortable." The attendant paused for a moment, then let out a small, dismissive laugh. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it," she said. "You're fine." Mariah's chest tightened, a knot of frustration forming in her stomach. It wasn't just the dismissiveness of the flight attendant, it was the way she spoke, as if she was doing Mariah a favor by acknowledging her at all. It was a common experience for her, the way some people trivialized her feelings, minimized her presence. She was used to it, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, the flight attendant interrupted. "Look, it was a mistake. No need to make a big deal out of it," the attendant said, brushing past her. Mariah felt the heat rising in her face, the unfairness of the situation cutting through her. She wasn't making a big deal out of it. She was simply trying to be treated with respect, but that apparently was too much to ask for. She stepped back, watching as the attendant continued with her duties, leaving Mariah standing there, feeling small. At that moment, something inside Mariah snapped. She turned on her heel and walked straight up to the desk. Without hesitation, she asked to speak with the manager. The gate agent looked at her with mild surprise, but Mariah stood firm, her voice steady. "I need to speak with your manager about something." A few minutes later, the manager appeared, a middle-aged man who seemed disinterested at first. But when Mariah explained the situation, he listened, or at least pretended to listen. "I understand you're upset," he said, nodding. "But this isn't something we normally address unless it's an actual complaint." Mariah's heart sank. It felt like the manager wasn't really hearing her. He was going through the motions, checking the boxes. "I'm making it a complaint," she said. "This is about respect." The manager sighed and nodded, taking her complaint into the system. He assured her it would be looked into and with that dismissed her. She could tell he didn't take it seriously, and that sting only deepened the feeling of alienation. As Mariah boarded the plane, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She hadn't expected this to escalate. She had only wanted to stand up for herself, to call out the subtle ways in which she had been made to feel lesser. Yet now, she wasn't sure what would happen next. What had started as a simple moment of frustration had snowballed into something much bigger, something that, no matter what, she couldn't ignore. The flight to Dallas was long, but Mariah barely noticed the time. She sat in her seat, her mind replaying the events over and over again. Her heart was still racing from the confrontation, the way the flight attendant had brushed her off. The manager's indifferent response. She could feel the injustice tightening around her, suffocating her every thought. How had it escalated so quickly? A simple encounter with a flight attendant, a seemingly small issue, had triggered a whirlwind of emotions, and now she was unsure of the consequences she might face. As the plane began its descent into Dallas, Mariah's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her bag, heart skipping a beat when she saw an email from her supervisor. Subject: immediate attention required. Her pulse quickened, fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. Mariah, we regret to inform you that we have received a report of an incident at the airport involving your conduct. We take such matters very seriously, and at this time, we have decided to suspend your employment until further notice pending a full investigation. Please reach out to HR for further details. The words blurred as her vision clouded. Her stomach sank, the sudden weight of the message almost too much to bear. She had only wanted to speak up, to call out the subtle injustice. But now, it seemed that her voice, her willingness to stand her ground, had led her down a path she didn't know how to navigate. Was it really worth it? Was it worth losing everything over a moment of standing up for herself? As the plane landed and passengers began to exit, Mariah felt like she was moving in slow motion. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the world outside the airplane window seemed to blur into a wash of bright lights and distant cityscapes. She knew she couldn't just walk away from this. It wasn't just about the incident anymore. It was about proving a point, about showing that her dignity and respect weren't for sale. But the weight of the decision hung over her. The reality was setting in. By speaking out, she might have just cost herself the job she worked so hard to secure. She could feel her chest tightening, her breath shallow as she struggled to find a sense of calm. She knew she had to face what was coming next, but what if it was too late? What if this was the moment that shattered everything? Later, that evening, as Mariah walked into her apartment, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from the airline's HR department. She braced herself, sitting down as her heart thudded loudly in her ears. "Hello, Mariah," the voice on the other end began, flat and emotionless. "We've completed the review of the incident." Her pulse raced, waiting for the verdict. "While we acknowledge your complaint, we've decided that your actions in bringing the matter to attention in such a public manner were unprofessional. Therefore, your employment has been terminated, effective immediately." The room spun around her, the words sinking deep into her chest. She was no longer part of the company. Her career, her stability, everything she had worked for, was gone in an instant, all because she dared to speak up. Mariah sat there for a long moment, her thoughts racing. She had done what she thought was right, standing up for herself, demanding respect. But the price was too high. The unjust treatment she had tried to confront had now come full circle, stripping her of her livelihood. But then, something within her flickered. The words of the flight attendant, the dismissive tone of her manager, suddenly made sense. This was the harsh reality of speaking out. She had been punished for daring to challenge the status quo, and that, more than anything, fueled a fire deep within her. Mariah wasn't going to let this be the end. The phone call ended, but the fight had only just begun. She wasn't going to let her story fade away into silence. She knew there would be consequences, but she also knew this wasn't just about her job anymore. This was about something much bigger. This was about showing the world that the cycle of silence, the kind of subtle racism that went unnoticed by so many, could no longer be ignored. She would fight, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel less than, for every instance of injustice that had been brushed aside. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed felt like a blur of confusion and anger. Mariah didn't sleep much, and when she did, the words from HR echoed through her mind, loud and unforgiving. "Your actions were unprofessional. Your employment has been terminated." It all seemed so final, so cold. But in the quiet of her apartment, where the weight of the world seemed to settle around her, something changed. She knew she had to make sense of what had happened. She knew she couldn't just let this injustice define her. Mariah's first instinct was to retreat, to fade into the background to avoid any more confrontation. But something inside her refused to let that happen. It was the same feeling that had driven her to stand up in the first place. The undeniable sense that what had happened wasn't just about her. It was about all the people who had been silenced, dismissed, or overlooked simply because of the color of their skin. The flight attendant's careless kick wasn't just a minor incident. It was a reflection of the broader, deeply ingrained racism that still thrived in the world. She began to take action. She called a lawyer and consulted with organizations dedicated to fighting workplace discrimination. She shared her story on social media, a powerful, vulnerable post that resonated with thousands of others who had faced similar discrimination. She had no idea how it would unfold, but she knew that she couldn't stay silent. The more people reached out to her, the more she realized how many others had been silently enduring the same kind of mistreatment. Within a week, a petition had gained traction, demanding accountability from the airline. The hashtag, #RespectMariah, was everywhere, and news outlets picked up the story, amplifying the message that no one should be subjected to racial discrimination, no matter how subtle or disguised. Mariah's courage to stand up for herself had sparked a larger conversation, one that extended beyond her own experience. The airline, under immense public pressure, was forced to respond. They issued a public apology, acknowledging the incident and the way it had been mishandled. Mariah's termination was overturned, though the company's apology felt hollow in the wake of everything that had happened. But the impact was undeniable. Mariah had forced a shift, a change in perspective. The world had seen how even the smallest actions could carry devastating consequences, and how standing up to injustice, no matter the cost, could inspire others to do the same. Though she was reinstated, Mariah knew that the battle wasn't over. The true victory wasn't about getting her job back, though that was important. It was about the ripple effect her story had caused. People were talking, demanding change, and questioning the way systemic racism had quietly shaped so many lives, especially in professional settings. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been dismissed, ignored, or silenced because of their race. Mariah's story became a symbol of resilience. She received messages of gratitude and support from all corners of the world. People thanked her for showing them that it was okay to speak up, that their voices mattered. The fight for justice, for equality, for respect was far from over, but Mariah had proven that sometimes all it took was one person to stand tall, to speak out, and to spark a change that couldn't be ignored. As the months passed, Mariah reflected on what had transpired. She had lost her job, but she had gained something far more valuable: the ability to stand in her truth. She had become a beacon for others, a reminder that one voice, even in the face of great opposition, could make an undeniable impact, and that, more than anything, was a victory that no one could take from her.